Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. If you're new, welcome back. If you've seen one of my previous videos, I know I don't post that often, but I think especially for this video, I've kind of been processing it for like the past year or so, and I feel like I'm finally ready to like say it publicly that I have ADHD. Just to give you guys a little bit of a background in case you're not familiar with what ADHD is, though I feel like if you're watching this video, you probably do have an idea because like why else would you click on the video? If you have ADHD, it stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. It used to be called ADD, but now most people call it ADHD. There's like 3 types of ADHD. So there's the inattentive, and then there is the hyperactive, and then there is a combined one. And something that you may not know is that ADHD is found to be quite underdiagnosed in women and also people of color. I think there are a lot of like socioeconomic machines at play on why women and people of color don't get diagnosed, but as a double minority, that highly reduced my chances of ever being diagnosed with ADHD if I had not like done my research ahead of time and like understood like what the signs and symptoms were. And also like I was not the first one in my family to be diagnosed with ADHD, so there's also that. Okay, so in terms of what ADHD means, like if you were to be diagnosed with ADHD, it's kind of like it's literally having an attention problem, but not in the attention problem in the way that you think. So like a typical thing that people will say whenever like doctors would tell parents that like, hey, maybe your kid might have ADHD is like, oh, like there's no way that my kid could have ADHD because look, they're able to focus for 6 hours at a time on a video game, but they have no wish or will to pick up a book. And so it feels like it's a choice where you put your attention towards. And I feel like a good way to describe ADHD is like you do not really have a choice in where your focus goes. It kind of just goes everywhere. And I'll get into like how like I am medicated, so something to mention there. I don't take my medicine like all the time. Part of it is like I forget to take it. And then other times it's like on the weekends I don't really feel like I need to focus. But yeah, like there is a stark difference when I was finally medicated that made me kind of realize like, yeah, girl, you had ADHD this whole time. Okay, so what made me think that I had ADHD? So I feel like ever since I was around like 10 years old, I had a name to it. Maybe even younger than that, maybe like 8 or 9. I suspected that I may have ADHD, and this was largely because I watched Ryan Higa's videos here on YouTube way back when, and like his videos were so funny. I used to literally just watch them all the time. And so like he has this series called How to ADHD, or like something around like his experience with ADHD, because like luckily for him, though kind of unluckily, because I know that he's spoken about how he didn't really love being medicated or something like that, like growing up with ADHD, but it really like felt relatable, like his experience of ADHD. And literally like one of the jokes in his How to ADHD videos is, oh look, a butterfly. And let me tell you, I am still like that. I always say like, oh my god, look, a bird. Oh my gosh, look at those flowers. Oh my gosh, look, a squirrel. Like legitimately, whenever I do say that, it just like facepalm moment, you know? Girl. Yeah, anyway, so that's kind of where I was just like, wow, like that's so relatable. But in the back of my mind, I was just like, oh, no way I have that, you know? Like I think it's like a very serious thing, and like no way I could have that as a problem, like, you know? But I think even before that, like I always knew I was a little bit different. I was not like the other girls, but actually, I was very much like the other girls. I'm a very basic person, but I knew that I was kind of different, like growing up, because I had really good grades. And so a term that they use for like the type of ADHD personality I am. I don't really know. It's like, it's not scientifically proven, but I like consider myself a high performing person with ADHD. And that's because like from a very young age, I've always been like a gifted child. And this is even with like me like growing up in China for the first 3 years of my life first before moving to the US. But like even in pre-kindergarten and kindergarten, like I had good grades. I mean, how can you even have good grades in pre-K? Like if you just show up, I think you get an A. But like, you know what I mean? Like I've always been like faster than my peers in like picking things up and like learning things, even though English was my second language, which SpongeBob taught me English. I'm just saying that. Like, he's a really good teacher. But anyway, so where was I? Okay. So despite that, despite being gifted and like picking things up faster, I was never like actually good at school, if that makes sense. So like always got A's on my tests, like 100s, easy. But when it came to doing homework, which is more of like those day-to-day things that you have to do and also factor into your grades, my homework was the worst because I would just never do it. Like I would put it off. I clearly remember when I was like in the 3rd grade, it was the end of winter break and the entire winter I had not touched my reading logs. And then I decided to wake up at 2 a.m. the day before school and start writing out all 14 of my reading logs that had to be half a page long. And like, I just like, and the thing is, I was reading at the time. Like, that's the thing. Like, for a lot of people, like, with ADHD, they would be playing video games. My family kind of did not grow up affluent. And also, like, I am an older Gen Z, so we didn't really have, like, fast internet growing up. So, like, when I got home after school, I would spend my time like watching TV for hours, or I would go to the library, borrow 30 books, and I would finish reading those 30 books in like a week or so, basically. Like I would just like read through them, and I was reading like chapter books eventually. I think in the 3rd grade I started reading chapter books because I had finished reading all of the picture books, right? I don't really know what reading material 3rd graders read now, but I think I was reading chapter books. I was a fan favorite of Geronimo Stilton, like Amelia Bedelia, like those are really good books. I love reading. I hated writing things out. I hated doing homework. And so because I didn't like doing that, I just did not do that until the last possible moment. So I would be that kid who was doing their homework during lunch, doing their homework on the bus, but like never really doing homework at home. Literally would be doing homework like the period before like math class. So if it's writing right now, I probably did my writing homework on the bus on the way to school, and then I would do my math homework. Like, and this was in elementary school. This is when like homework was not hard. It's just, it was hard mentally for me to even get started. And this is where the shame starts, because I'm like, even though I didn't like doing it, I knew I had to do it, but I hated doing it. Wait, did that make sense? Okay. And this is where the shame starts, because even though I didn't really love doing it, I knew that I had to do it, but I wasn't doing it until the very, very last moment. And this is like in elementary school already. So we see my coping mechanisms coming into play, right? Again, I think I still had really good grades because like even though I was doing the bare minimum, so was all of my classmates, because we're all kids, right? I feel like I benefited a little bit from like the model minority myth, because I went to a school that was predominantly Hispanic in Corona, Queens, and low-key, like, were my teachers just racist and just assumed that I was smart, and then that's how like I developed into like an intelligent person. But am I really intelligent? Do you know what I mean? Like, these are all things that I think about from time to time, you know, as it goes. But back to the topic. Yeah, so these were kind of the signs that I was not a typical kid, because I had talked about this with my friends at the time, and they're all kids, and they're like, Yeah, like I do my homework right when I get home. Literally, even if my parents threatened me, I would just not do my homework. It was bad. And like, I still ended up graduating valedictorian of my grade. So again, I feel like a lot of socioeconomic factors were at play here where my ADHD was not recognized because I was masking a lot, and then also I might have slightly above average intelligence that's boosted by the confidence or the thought that I am a gifted child. Does that make sense? Or that could also all be imposter syndrome, and I actually am intelligent. This is the thing with like ADHD. It's kind of like you don't really have a solid understanding of yourself because you're constantly questioning yourself and your identity. And sometimes I feel like I'm also a people pleaser. So I feel like I morph myself in ways to be whatever someone else wants me to be. But I'm working on that. I'm not like that anymore. I think I have stronger boundaries now. Not super strong, but like they're there, you know? So there's that. Okay, now I am kind of regretting that I did not at least write out an outline of my talking points. But okay, so I think I kind of you understand what I mean when I say that the signs of ADHD were there. These are like the key signs. Procrastinates, difficulty paying attention when they want to pay attention or when they need to be paying attention. Messy, loses things. Okay, so losing things. I legitimately lost my keys and broke my glasses 4 times in my time as an elementary school student. So at that point, my parents, smart of them, they got like the lanyard and had me wear my keys at all times because otherwise I would just misplace them. And even with the lanyard, I would misplace them or I would forget my keys at home, and so I would just wait outside the apartment door until like someone else in the family got home because I was usually the first one to get home. Though to be fair, like maybe I should have had a babysitter pick me up at that point because I'm still in elementary school, but immigrant parents, it's all different, right? Yeah, so I used to like lose things a lot. I would forget things. I would always like have a messy desk because I would just forget things at the back of my desk. I would forget homework sheets. I would forget my notes. I would forget if there was a test. So I just never had an organized agenda really. I kind of just like kept the like due dates in my head and like just dealt with it whenever it came, but like I never really planned ahead for things, even though I tried to. Like I would like at the start of every year I'd be like, it's time for me to focus, to really get into gear. It never really happened. Okay, so now in middle school, I was in the gifted class all throughout elementary school, I think. So yeah, so then I was in the gifted and talented class in middle school, which is good because like we were taught like more advanced things and we had more expectations put on us. I didn't really, like my parents couldn't really afford too many prep classes. So I had taken like Hunter high school prep classes for like 1.5 of a semester, which by the way, like that did not go well for me because I ended up going to those prep classes either really late or on time, but by the time I got there, I would just fall asleep. So this is another pattern of mine that is not helpful, where if the subject matter does not interest me, if I have other things on my mind, something that will always give me dopamine is sleeping a lot. And I guess I'm also always tired. This is another thing, like if you do have ADHD, like your sleeping patterns are very irregular. Just existing in an average 16-hour day is really difficult because you're experiencing a lot of stimuli all at once. You just get exhausted much more quickly compared to like the regular person. With these prep classes, I would fall asleep at every single one, I would just never do the homework. It was such a waste of money for my parents. I felt kind of bad about that. Never really got a letter from Hunter High School, so I don't know if I got in or not. It's kind of like, what is that box? Schrodinger's cat. It's like Schrodinger's cat. I don't know if I got in or if I didn't get in. I don't know if that analogy makes sense, but yeah. Just continued on in middle school. I was just vibing along. I love singing. I love creative things. I used to play the violin in elementary school too. I was like involved in a lot of extracurriculars actually. And like I was into chorus, I was into plays, things like that. So yeah, in middle school, continued on. I was doing my theater thing. I was like singing on the side. Grades, okay, they were Asian, okay. So I was like a 93, 94 average for most of middle school. But again, really started struggling when math got much more advanced and required actual studying. Ironically, I have an accounting degree, but again, math is not my strong suit, but I was still doing okay until about the 8th grade. I would say this is where like signs started to show that despite like my maybe like innate intelligence, I was not keeping up with my classmates because they also studied. Like I did not study ever. I would just try to learn whatever it was that was taught in class, barely do the homework, and then like go to class. So it was not great. And so that's when my grades started to really slip in math. So rather than getting like 90s, 95s, I was starting to get like 88s, 75s. One time I got a 60 and that was really, really bad. But I think like at the end of it, I still got like an 88 and all of my other grades kind of balanced it out. So my average stayed consistently high. Ended up taking the SHSATs, and this is kind of where like there is a downfall of my grades. Like you'll start to see like in elementary school, I'm like, woohoo, like I am vibing, I am valedictorian. By the end of high school, I will be down here, but like it's hard. So I took the SHSAT at this time, which if you guys are not based out of New York City, you probably don't know about this, but it stands for Specialized High School Standardized something test, Standardized Assessment Test. Something like that, whatever. We just call it the SHSAT, and it's this test that you need to take to try to get into the top 8 schools in New York City. And so like you can only get into these schools by taking the SHSAT, but like once you do get in, it's a really big deal. Parents would send their kids to SHSAT prep classes so that they could get into these schools, because then it's like kind of like a pipeline straight to like the Ivy Leagues, right? So I ended up getting into Stuyvesant High School, which is like, it's arguably maybe not the best school, but like it is the one that's most difficult to get into. Usually the cutoff is around 560, and I ended up getting 563 at that time. And I was like, holy cow, because I did not prep for it at all. Like, oh, I took one practice test the morning of, and then I went to take it, and then I went home. And like that was it. And I was like, yeah, like whatever. Which again, like why did I just, like I knew it was important to take the test, and I knew it was important to study for the test. I had the practice tests, like the 2 practice tests. You could even like buy a whole book. You could borrow from the library a whole book. Thankfully, because I was in the gifted and talented classes, I was provided like the algebra classes that I needed and the knowledge to like take the test without much prep. I think in other schools and other classes, it's much more difficult because you are not provided the same resources, which I feel like gifted and talented programs, like there's a whole separate discussion about that. I don't really have too many big opinions that are like different from others, so I don't really know if I would make a video about that. But yeah, like got into Stuyvesant High School, and this is where it gets really bad because you can see from year to year my grades just like slipping. Start off really strong. I started off with a 94 average in a bunch of different classes, but once I started taking on AP classes, did not take any of the AP math classes because I was already struggling in the regular math classes. Trigonometry destroyed me. Like, it is so difficult to understand, and part of that probably because I did not ever pick up the textbook, never read from it, never did any practice problems, just went into those tests like I thought I knew something, and I would maybe review my notes beforehand to understand like the principles and the fundamentals for it, which obviously it helps, you know, like to understand like why something is the way it is. Did not do that well, like going into, I think junior year was like my biggest stressful, most worst year ever. And so like freshman year 94, sophomore year 93, and like granted this was with me taking chorus classes, so it's like kind of artificially inflating my GPA. Then the next year 92 for junior year, and then I think that was the lowest. It was like 91.8 or something. It was like low for an Asian, I think. I was still like, but the thing is like I feel like the teachers were very nice in their grading. So there's also that. And then like, you know, senior year doesn't really count because like doing the bare minimum, like the teachers will just be like, okay, at least you're doing the bare minimum. Let me give you like 93. So senior year, I don't even count the grades, but like junior year, I think is where it was really stressful for me. I was taking on a lot of extracurriculars because this is another thing. People with ADHD have a lot of interests and a lot of hyper focus. So for me, it was music. I love music. I was in chorus all 4 years. I was also in like sing, which is like the theater production side of things. I loved acting and all of those things. And so I would take on like extra responsibilities. I mean, it's also good to be a leader in things. I would just like try to do so many things, but it's kind of difficult to balance all of that and also be a good student and also start preparing for colleges. So I feel like that's kind of where my failure came. I mean, like my parents didn't really prepare me for the college application process because again, they're immigrants, so they aren't familiar with it. They kind of just expected that like me and my elder sisters would understand it. My second eldest sister really helped me with the college application process, but it was still very stressful. My SAT scores were not that great because again, did not practice for them. And then because I did not do enough prior planning of things, I ended up just not having enough time to take an extra SAT test to do a super score or something like that. And like, I feel like part of it is probably like I could have benefited from an SAT prep class because the essays that I wrote, I always got like 600s. But like for math and English, surprisingly, I got like 700. It was just like the writing that was really difficult, but having a non-2400 SAT score is just like, there's no way you're gonna get into like the greatest schools ever. Anyway, I feel like I messed up the whole college application process, but like to be fair, I was not aware of a lot of things going into it, even though I tried to like ask my friends and like get help there. But like again, like a lot of us don't know what the heck we're doing, you know? And I'm not mad about it, you know? I ended up going to CUNY Baruch, which is not bad. It's the same school that my sister had gone to and like was going to at the time, and thankfully I got a full scholarship, so I'm not mad, you know? Like I already knew in high school that student loan debt is crazy and that I don't want to be in debt ever. And so either it was going to be, I think, SUNY Binghamton or it's going to be CUNY Baruch. I was like, you know what? I'll just be in the city. I can also intern at the same time. Okay, so college was actually not that difficult compared to Stuyvesant. I don't know if like I'm crazy for saying that, but literally like it was a breeze up until a point for college to just have a good grade while also like working at the same time. Because again, like I could just, it's so bad. Like the way that I would study for things is like just test centric. So I would just never pay attention in my classes, read the textbook, do some practice questions, and then take the test, and I was fine. Especially if it's a multiple choice question. I think if you're good at English, if you have good communication skills, you can figure out multiple choice questions without actually knowing much about the topic, if that makes sense. Yeah, so I would just kind of like coast through college, and then I feel like this is such a long video. I'm gonna have to cut it down, but yeah, like I really struggled my senior year, I think, in college. older junior to senior, because at that point I already knew that I didn't want to do accounting, and so I just was not paying attention during my accounting classes at all. I think I got like C's or like B's in both of those classes, so it was not great. But because all of my other classes were A's, like I think it was fine. Like I still ended up with like a 3.5 GPA. Again, I am a strong Bayesian, as they all say. So yeah, like college was okay. I graduated. That's all I needed. Again, still had the terrible coping mechanisms of cramming, just cramming, procrastinating, never actually studying, falling asleep in the library, and then like the night before an exam. That's actually when I started to pull all-nighters, because I didn't really pull all-nighters in high school. I would more usually do like, you know, stay awake until maybe 1 to 2 a.m. and then like wake up at 5 a.m. if I needed to like finish something. But like in college, that's when I started to do like, okay, I'm gonna sleep from 8 to 12, wake up, and then 12 a.m. up until the exam, I am gonna be studying. And it worked, right? Then things started to get like kind of difficult for me, because by senior year, I knew that I didn't want to do accounting and I wanted to explore. I didn't really want to do marketing because I didn't really understand it still, like how people like come up with ideas and things like that. So throughout all of this, I wonder if I have ADHD. I seem to be really struggling here. But then I would always talk myself down from it. I'm just like, you know what? Like I'm still doing okay. I did some counseling sessions in college, and I was just like asking them like, do you think I have ADHD? And then they were like, well, let's just hear your story first. Didn't really end up with an ADHD diagnosis there, because again, I think it's because if I'm a high performing person, and like high performing by their standards, not by my standards, because by my standards, I know I could do so much better. I know I could do it. Like I have the mind for it. I do not have the focus for it. I just get distracted so much, like throughout college. Like, what am I doing with my free time? I am just either reading a ton of books, watching a lot of YouTube videos, filming YouTube videos, because again, that was like one of my passions and interests. So I would be like filming it, editing videos. But again, like, am I studying? Why is studying not here? I know that studying is important, but I just don't want to do it, you know? Like, there is no dopamine coming from studying, you know? Like, you get the dopamine from the test, like acing the test, right? But because it's in that kind of like step-by-step process, like I'm not motivated to study. But I know that I could do it if like if something just changed. I knew that I would be so much more successful, but I couldn't figure out why I couldn't do it. And there were so many times where I had breakdowns, where I was super stressed because I would keep trying, like just staring at the book. There were times where I would just stare at the same line over and over and be thinking about something completely different for like 20 minutes. And then I realized like, oh, I did not even read one page of this textbook. And like, why is that, you know? Anyway, no one saw a problem. They were like, you're fine. Like, there are people out here actually struggling. Why are you bringing this up? Like, you know, like, it's kind of like that, which is not, it's not fun, because I feel like I was going through a lot of things. And I think it would have been nice to like have someone who was like compassionate. But I understand, like my school's counseling center is probably dealing with people with much more serious problems than a seemingly like high performing student who has too much anxiety and stress about their grades. I get it. At this point, I had already known that I probably had ADHD, and I was looking up like jobs for people with ADHD, and like they were like, management consulting is one of the options for people with ADHD, because you are project based. You are going to be moving from project to project. You're never going to be on something for longer than a year. And that's how you can really like change things up and like kind of work with your own like chemical imbalance, right? My Chemical Romance. I ended up getting a consulting role at a boutique financial services company. So super elated for that. I got that in like December of my senior year, so I didn't have to worry at all about job loss, except when COVID happened literally the next semester. But thankfully my company was not one of the ones where they like canceled full-time roles. They just deferred me to October. So that takes us to October of 2020, where I started off as a consultant. I think it's also like the transition from college, which is like a very structured time, to like specifically like working from home in, you know, like, and having no social life unless you outwardly like reach out to people to get that. It was like a very difficult time, and this is where my rejection sensitivity really comes in. I got like super depressed. I gained a lot of weight because of my binge eating problems, which is as a result of the ADHD. And so that ultimately led me to finally taking the step to ask someone, do I have ADHD? And ask a medical professional, because before all I had been doing is like asking like counselors, which they're not the same. I don't think they can diagnose, but like you have to go to a psychiatrist if you want to be diagnosed with ADHD. Not like want to be, like if you want to check if you have ADHD. And like by this time, like a close relative of mine also like turned out that they had ADHD, and they also had a late diagnosis. So for me, I was just like, yep, it's time, because again, high performing student, but at the same time never really does her work, is forgetful, loses things, messy at home, you know, like never remembers to do their homework. But then like in my work life, it's like, oh, like really difficult to manage all of my responsibilities. I have to get like, it's different. So like for work, I feel like work is not that difficult because I get hyper organized about work, because my fear of failure is keeping me in check. However, because of that, something else has to be dropped, you know, like I can't juggle everything. I can only hold one thing at a time, which, to be fair, should everyone be responsible for juggling everything? I don't think so, but you know, that's just how it is. And so when I can only focus on my job, and like I get super tired after work because I'm masking the whole time, my apartment gets super messy. And you probably can't see it right now because the blur is really helping me here, but my apartment is super messy. So I'm thinking about making a whole series around cleaning, because I think I need to incentivize myself to clean. And part of that is like, if I make YouTube content, that is a way to like incentivize myself, because then like I'm like, oh yay, I get to post another YouTube video, I get to like talk to people on the internet. But yeah, I really need to figure out like some kind of framework to keep my apartment like decently clean. And this is a year after I've been diagnosed with ADHD. So like, even though I know I have ADHD now, like for sure, like 100%, I still do not have like my life together, which I feel like is kind of the sad part, you know, like you think that once you get this magical diagnosis, like, oh, everything will be fixed now if I just get medicated. But it's not true, you know, because like there are times when the medicine is not working, you know, and that's kind of gonna be when you're not gonna be working. You're gonna be so checked out, you know. And so I feel like that's still a part that I need to help myself with. But yeah, so like that's the whole life story around how I knew from a very young age that my mind was a little off. Again, I'm a very creative person, you know. Even though I'm doing management consulting, I'm also like, I am a design consultant now. I switched from like a generalist role to design, specifically UX design, because I have a passion for it, and also like I am interested in it. And so if I'm interested in it, it's kind of like a hyper focused thing. Like I will be very focused when it comes to my work around something that I'm interested and passionate about. But again, like normal everyday things can be so difficult for me. Like I will order packages and then not open them for a week, or I will open them and then leave the mess for a week. Like it's just bad coping mechanisms. And like you could say like it should be fine, like be kind to yourself And yes, I am kind to myself. I'm not gonna say like, I'm not gonna like force myself to clean if I don't like mentally feel like it. But I'm not gonna be the only one living with the consequences of my actions, you know? And so like I have a long-term partner and he is great. Love Patrick so much. If I am messy and it spreads to an entire home, if my hoarding tendencies spreads to an entire home, if we end up having kids, like something that I'm so scared about. Something that I'm so scared about is that I can barely take care of myself now. Like things look pretty, you know, like I love pretty things. Like that's what kind of like pushes me. That's what drives me. It's a motivator. It gives me dopamine. What happens when a child who is so much responsibility comes into my life and I need to take care of them and me at the same time? You know, like it's just, I think I need to put together frameworks that will support both myself and my future children, because I want to have children, you know, like, and like, what am I gonna do when they struggle the same way that I have? Like, I want to have a solution for them in place. So that they don't have to go through what I had to go through. So, moving on from that emotional point, that was how I got diagnosed. I ended up going to a psychiatrist, and they conducted the assessment, and I just answered their questions, and I talked a little bit about like what it was like growing up. And at the end of it, they were like, yeah, girl, like you checked off everything to the max when it comes to ADHD. And again, like there's like an underdiagnosis of women. And like, let's not even talk about the Asian community when it comes to mental health. I feel like there's still a stigma around saying that if I have depression or if I have anxiety. I think the stigma for ADHD is like, is that even a real problem? Like, is it really? Are you just trying to get drugs? Because again, like the medication for people with ADHD are stimulants mainly. But I mean, they do use a couple of other ones that aren't stimulants, but like the first line of defense is usually like stimulants. And like there's like so much stigma there. Like it's a fake disease, like just focus more. Like those are all like the toxic things that people say around this specific condition. And again, there's a lot of science behind it around like why people end up having ADHD, and there's a very strong genetic component to it as well. So if you know someone who is like closely related to you, just check. You know, it doesn't hurt to check if like your symptoms align with like the signs and symptoms of ADHD, and you know someone near you, like closely related to you, who has ADHD, maybe it's nice to just go check, you know, like it doesn't hurt. And like if you do have the resources, check, you know, because when I finally got that diagnosis, even though I've suspected that I had ADHD, it was both a climactic and anticlimactic moment for me, because it just felt like I let go. I finally had an explanation. There's another part of it. I'm a crier. Okay. When I finally got that ADHD diagnosis, it felt like this weight. When I finally got that ADHD diagnosis, it felt like this weight came off of my shoulders. Like I had finally let go of this breath that I had been holding for my entire life. Like I could finally externalize my problems. Not all of them, to be fair, you know? Like some of these problems are not ADHD related, but it felt like I could finally externalize that. This is the ADHD talking. When I finally took medication for it, and I described this to a couple of friends, it felt like I took the pill at 9 a.m. and it's a long release formula. I took it at like 9 a.m. and it felt like over the course of an hour I had put on these noise canceling headphones, and it just felt like all of those noises that I've heard for my entire life just silenced themselves. I could think in singular sentences. I didn't, and like a way to describe how ADHD feels like in the brain is like you have 10 different TVs turned on at the same time and they're all playing. So this is why, like, for a coping mechanism for a lot of people is multitasking. So they could be watching something and like doing something else at the same time, like putting on music in the background while you're cleaning, things like that, because it literally just replicates. Like, I don't know how to describe it, but basically I had been sitting in front of my work desk. I took my medication, and there had been this incessant leaf blower noise outside my window. And this leaf blower bothers me every single morning, and it's bothered me for like over 8 months by that time. And I knew that it would be going on at 9 a.m. It was this huge noise in my mind, and over that hour it just quieted itself down. I can always hear like for example, I have an air purifier running and it's really loud to me. But whenever I'm medicated, it just feels like my mind can just ignore those noises. It's hearing it, and it's like, okay, well, you know, you don't need to hear this noise all that time. So why don't we just negate that in our mind? You know, like that's just how it felt. And there's still days where I forget to take my medication, but on the days that I do, I think it's been incredibly helpful for me to just be able to like focus and hear my thoughts and get my thoughts organized and like plan things out. All things that are super difficult for you if you have ADHD, because what we struggle most with is executive function, meaning like your ability to plan things ahead of time, like your executive abilities. I don't know how to describe it. Maybe in a separate video I could like get into it. But yeah, like finally getting that diagnosis, finally getting the treatment that I needed, incredible. It was life-changing, you know? Like now I could focus on my work when I needed to. I could also not. I could like do what I want. I felt like I had control over what I wanted to do, which I've never had growing up. And I felt like with the diagnosis, it's helped me be much kinder to myself than if not, because I think the standards that I had been holding were so high. And like now I could say like, hey, you're like a work in progress. ADHD is difficult. It's difficult to just exist with ADHD because you are so overwhelmed by all the stimuli like all the time, and that I am doing a great job like keeping it together for the most part. And just, you know, like I feel like finally I could be I am happy. Not I could be, I am happy now. And that could be from a lot of things, but mainly it's not like this part of me. That's kind of a paradoxical sentence. It's kind of like I am me, ADHD is a part of me, but there are ways that I can manage my ADHD and I can still do the things that I want. It's not a limiter. It's never really been a limiter, but if I'm ever late, if I forget something, is it like I'm not gonna beat myself over it because this is me, you know? And yeah, I wanted to hop on and talk about it because I feel like not a lot of like Asian people talk about ADHD aside from Ryan Higa. Hi Ryan, if you're watching this, probably not, but like, so I feel like if you're seeing this, you're probably already suspecting that you might have ADHD. So I just wanted to talk about my experience and what it was like growing up with undiagnosed ADHD and my struggles, but also like what it can feel like on the other side. You know, the journey doesn't stop here. As I said, I still struggle with a lot of things, but again, like, I'm much kinder to myself. Before I would beat myself to a pulp with the mean things that I would say in my inner dialogue. But thankfully, that inner dialogue is also silenced by the medication. So, huzzah! Okay, cool. So that is it for my video. Thank you guys so much if you watched any part of this. I appreciate it, I really do. Like, let me know if you have any suspicions that you might have ADHD. Like, I feel like if we keep the comments down below, I will moderate the comments because, you know, there is no bullying allowed here. But I am so interested to hear if you guys have similar experiences. And yeah, like if you have any other questions, just let me know down below. I'll try to answer them either in the comments or in a video. I really do want to start posting more often. I finally got a fixed lens, so the focusing is all good. I finally have the structure in my life now that I had lost after graduating college, that I feel like I could start like moving things in with what I'm passionate about. So yeah, I'm gonna hopefully post at least on a monthly basis now, but I think I'm starting to lose my voice. But thank you guys so much for watching again, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!